Good evening. It's Monday, July 27th, 2026 at 6 p.m. And I'm calling to order a meeting of the Katuitt Fire District Prudential Committee. Our first order of business is all who are able, please stand and pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll take the roll now. This is Mark Lynch, Chair, here.
Except for the president.
John Havel here.
Here.
Ryan Willett here.
And we are conducting this meeting in person and by Zoom. First order of business is public comment. First of all, is there any public comment from anyone here in the audience? Ryan, can you check and see if anyone has their hand up in the Zoom?
No hands raised in the Zoom.
Okay, we're going to go on then to approving the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was June 22nd, 2026. I move to approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The meeting minutes are approved. The next issue relates to the water department accumulated sick day funding issue, which we have discussed on multiple occasions over the last few months. I should say probably longer than that. Bear with me one moment.
This is, I'd say, unnecessary for today's meeting.
So at our meeting back in June, we proposed effects to this issue, which I will recap briefly from the meeting minutes. And again, I'm relating or referring to the unbudgeted water department accumulated sick leave payouts. The proposal was, for at least as a short-term solution, the water department could utilize its existing stabilization fund to cover any unanticipated sick leave reimbursement obligations subject to water department approval. That is, we are looking to you, Dave, and your compatriots to approve that proposal. The longer-term solution would be to establish a dedicated water department stabilization fund solely for accumulated sick leave reimbursements. And we just want to get your buy-in on that two-part proposal. And if we have the water department's approval, that's how we would proceed.
So on Wednesday of this week, we're meeting and we have this on the agenda. So whatever conclusion we reach tonight, I will bring to the commissioners for their approval. But in theory, based on Ray Colonel's email from Friday, I agree with the proposal moving forward. And want to clarify that the bylaws explicitly say that disbursements from the stabilization fund require a 2/3 vote.
No, I disagree. There are two types of stabilizations. I think that legislation, or the recent legislation probably hasn't been put into our bylaws. The current legislation is that a general stabilization fund requires 2/3. A special stabilization fund only requires majority vote.
Okay.
And this would constitute a special, both the one that we create long-term and the one that we're gonna be using in the interim, if we all agree. That would be another special stabilization.
Okay. Because then we would want to modify the bylaws. As it stands now, in 2019, we amended the bylaws. Article 9, Section 5, stabilization fund is hereby established. This is the first time a stabilization fund was created. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B is amended in 2016. Ray pointed out it's been amended since then. The fund shall be funded annually in the amount equal to the aggregate of $20 per meter for every active meter listed in the preceding December Water Department census and accounts. The fund will be accounted as a separate stabilization fund by the treasurer. The Water Department Stabilization Fund is to be used to fund any properly approved lawful expenditure of the Katuah Water Department. As per statute, any expenditure to be funded by the Water Stabilization Fund will require a 2/3 majority of those present and voting at a district meeting. Our initial concern was that the stabilization fund could only be used for capital expenses, but that is not the case.
No.
And Ray, just to be clear, you were saying that the language just quoted by Dave.
Well, what this language,
Requiring a 2/3 majority has been modified?
the current regulations are that there is a differentiation between a general stabilization and a special purpose stabilization. This would constitute a special purpose stabilization.
We're talking about the short-term solution now.
Well, either the short term or the long term would both be special purpose stabilization funds.
Okay,
If I may, I've got the current amendment. It says here, the specification, any alteration of purpose and any appropriation of funds from the general purpose fund shall be approved by a 2/3 vote, except as provided in paragraph G of section 21C, chapter 59, for a majority referendum vote, subject to said section 21C of said chapter 59. Any such vote shall be of the legislative body in the city, town, or district, subject to its charter. Appropriation of funds from a special purpose stabilization fund shall be approved by a majority vote. So,
so you're agreeing with Ray?
I'm agreeing.
Okay.
He's correct. So if we establish at the next annual district meeting a special fund,
All right,
we do need the vote of the ABM to do that. Then to fund it on your recommendation over 5 years, I believe that's
yeah,
an
so,
annual contribution of $16,000.
Yeah.
To get us to where we stand today, our liability as of June 30th is $77,739.05.
and I would just add that I didn't put the email. One of the reasons why I would suggest we have an MOU right now, it hasn't been raised in any of our disclosures financially, but it constitutes an unfunded liability, which could have a negative impact on our credit rating.
Right.
And this seems to be a very low cost, if you will, no pain way of averting that.
So,
Who would draft that memorandum of understanding?
I know where he's going.
Could you draft that memorandum of understanding?
I guess I can. Thank you.
if you could draft that and get it to me before Wednesday night,
Yeah,
I'll bring it to the meeting and we'll put it to a vote.
And the Friday email that you're discussing, we were copied on that?
Believe so.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, all right. I just
Yeah, I
wanted
think
to
all
make
three of
sure.
you were.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we are all in agreement, and we hope that the water department is in agreement as well.
I believe we are, but I'll find out from my fellow commissioners on Wednesday.
Terrific. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate it.
Thank
I
you.
think we'll have to have the bylaw committee impose an adjustment to as specified in the bylaws. So we have to update our bylaws for this new provision.
Yes. Yes,
Thank you.
okay,
Okay, thanks,
thanks,
Dave.
David. The next item is a school demolition update. This will be very brief. We're getting there. The last thing that we had to do was remove electrical transformers, which were in the basement. Those have been removed. Eversource did that. They are still on the property, I think, as of a couple of days ago, and need to be physically removed. But other than that, the building is completely demolished. The process of filling in the hole left by the building is complete, and they are doing great adding of soil and grading of soil right now. There are still a couple of punch list items, so to speak, before the replanting can take place, but we hope to get that done by the end of the week, and then replanting can begin, subject to decision about the best timing to make sure that the plants thrive. But other than that, we're just about there. Next agenda item is the CFD website. Again, thanks to Mr. Havel for his efforts in this regard, and he was going to give us a little walking tour of the new website.
Did you just switch the mouse over and then switch to present mode? I think it's behind that. Yeah, present. Oh, you're also on slide. Oh, it doesn't matter too much. Great. Yes, thank you. So this was this is a presentation to walk people through at, I would say, a fairly high level of the website, both in terms of the technology and the decisions behind it. It's meant to be, I would say, somewhat comprehensive, but not overly technical. So I have a few slides here, and I will tell the story. So when I was first thinking about the website and was approached to, begin work on the website, the main problems I identified were that I guess that were at that time were broken plugins and features that were tied to those plugins that did not function correctly. Similarly, this is related to PHP and WordPress, as this is a WordPress website, outdated updates, and what I call, or what's known as technical debt, which is just years and years of kind of putting Band-Aid solutions and duct tape to the point where nobody knows what to or how to do it, and it lacks kind of a singular vision. Unnecessary multi-site. This is just a feature of WordPress to separate one website into multiple websites. I believe the original idea was for the fire department to have their own separate WordPress, but it made it it was just messy because of that. I'd call it legally, in quotes, acceptable, but not effective in that publishing the open meeting requirements, and I'd say meeting that standard, but certainly not exceeding or going above and beyond the minimum of literally posting agendas and minutes on the website. And similarly, a built by committee situation where over the years is people kind of only a few people were working in it, but it was only like very small parts, and the majority of the website, I'd say 98% was entirely neglected. So lacking a cohesive structure. And then finally, the most important to me was no access or control of the website itself. Lisa had sent over some information about the hosting from what she had known, but Early on, I was able to talk to Barnstable County IT, figure out how it works, gain access to the website itself. And so all of this was able to be done independent of Barnstable IT, Barnstable County IT. So a little bit of a reminder of what it was. And this is the homepage. And first thing that stands out to me was the navigation, just a little bit all over the place. And then also this front page was used as to provide updates to specifically by Ryan and the Prudential Committee, provide updates on stuff. So you can see there, Kentuit School demolition and site remediation update. And then, lower at the bottom, not much of a footer, and then open burning for the Kentuit Fire District, which I'm not even sure when that was put up there. So kind of using a static page in order to make dynamic updates, which we all remember well. For each department, the fire department kind of used news posts for a little bit, but not much. It's really just fairly basic information. Kentuit Water Department similarly used their homepage for what's on here is selling the Dodge Ram and level 2 drought conditions. And these are all just pages that similar to a Word document that someone typed into it and then just saved, and then it publishes on there. And then Prudential Committee was largely, well, not say largely, it started with the history of the Prudential Committee, but then also went to tracking the progress of various projects. Big piece of this was the meetings. This is only a kind of a snapshot, but these were on pages of the website, and this is specifically a table, which means someone copied and pasted this information in there every single time. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but the issue there is that it's really, that's the only place where it lives, and it's the only place it can go. So in reviewing this page or these pages specifically, I did ensure that we had all of the documents downloaded and mostly renamed to make sense. The minutes and videos, checked them. A decent number were broken links, and I tried to track down as best as possible. This is showing 2005 or 25. It went back down to 2010. So it was many years of doing this way. And then, so the solution that I came to is first and foremost, rethink the navigation and content of the website. Now, this type of project for me and for a lot of people, it's easy to say, wow, this is going to be a great thing. This is going to have bells and whistles and do all sorts of cool things. But pretty quickly, I came to the understanding that the Kentuit Fire District is fairly small. We have the fire department, we have the different committees and commissioners, and I don't think we needed. I made a decision to not overcomplicate it unnecessarily, just because then there's more that can go wrong in the future. So, few core changes that were made. I mentioned it earlier, but dynamic custom posts versus static pages. This just means, and I'll illustrate it a little bit later on, having a single site instead of a multi-site, just from the initial look, a cleaner and more modern user interface and user experience, and keeping the pertinent information intact from the previous website. I didn't want this to be a rewriting of everything, mostly kind of consume it on the old website, figure out where it should go to be effective, and hopefully cover my bases to make sure that the information is there somewhere. And then also meeting ADA requirements and considerations. It's something where we could spend a lot of time and a lot of effort ensuring that we meet the ADA completely. I think this is a massive step in the right direction. And as I've mentioned before on this topic, I think with changing our day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month practices will be the best way to meet the standard when the requirement comes into play. And again, bolded, gain control for future development. So at this point, we have access to the hosting, we have access to the website itself. We can add users, we can make changes, we can have roles and stuff like that. So I'd say in a much better place just because of that aspect. On the website itself, kind of the homepage, wanted to keep the most important information, easy access. So that's why, a little bit of a nice image up there, and in case of emergency, to how the fire department website was before. But then also, fire department, water department, Freedom Hall meetings, documents, announcements. There are more parts to the website, obviously, but putting myself in the shoes of a a resident coming to the website, it's probably going to be somewhere in that range of what they're looking to do. Moving down the homepage, a little bit of background, explaining the different how the fire district works. I'll say a brief explanation for how the fire district works. The latest news, so just the 3 most recent posts from either any of the departments or the fire district in general. A summary of the most upcoming and most recent district meetings, and links to see the rest of the meetings, recent documents, and a footer that is more comprehensive than it was before, and should allow people to navigate to where they want to go more easily. Just starting with the departments, this is kind of an unnecessary page, but again, not trying to complicate it too much. If you're looking for something, it's probably going to be one of these 3 groups, because we don't really have anything else. So fire department, wanted this to be a standardized template for the most part across the different departments. At the top of the page, kind of breadcrumb navigation, the ability to go to water and Prudential as needed. Summary about what the mission is of the fire department, and Prudential and water. And then further down the page, sorry, I thought about just kind of bringing up the website and scrolling through it. This is just screenshots of bits of sections of it. So a little bit, yeah, sorry. It is not 2 columns like this. This is a single column. A list of this primary services by that department, in this case, residential fire inspections, burning regulations, small vessel decals, and fire personnel contract. Again, I took some liberty here, but I did my best to mirror the priorities of the fire department from the previous website. News and announcements. Most recently, they published a Winter Storm Hernando report as just kind of news, whereas beforehand the news was hidden and not particularly utilized. Again, list of the meetings and some information on the team, both our fire department's case, chief and deputy chief, and then the commissioners as well. Similarly with the water department, I only brought this up because Jen had asked for the ability to highlight an announcement. And so for them specifically, and I guess any department can use it, it's like using a tag on a post. They're able to say, hey, this is important. Here's the most important thing. In this case, it was the level 2 drought advisory. Further down the page, there's more information on the rates and kind of the water quality and resources that you would expect from the water department. And then finally on the Prudential Committee, it's largely Freedom Hall, but again, all following the same structure, so very standardized in this case. I would say the biggest thing, the thing that I spent the most time on were the meetings themselves. Again, it was thousands of them with thousands of documents. And the good news is we have I would say a robust repository of past meetings and notes, should anyone be interested in. And it was interesting seeing the change from audio recordings to video recordings and kind of all the different stuff throughout the years. But really just wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to learn about the meetings, whether it's kind of what day it is, if upcoming or past, and then also have the pertinent information on there, including the Zoom meeting link, where it is, what time it is, and then also the agenda, the minutes, the recording, just so it's kind of at your fingertips. And also, should people be interested in it, there's the ability to sort by date and by department as well, but I'd assume most people would be looking at this kind of the first page, the most recent ones. just to stay on this just for a second, big piece of this was making it as easy as possible to update the website. With the change going from a static page to dynamic posts. This is something where if you have the information about the meeting, left hand, this is on the dashboard, the main screen when you open up the websites as an admin, you're able to just type the title, select the event type, the tag, the start date, start time, venue, the link, the Zoom link, and the agenda, and then just click add event, and then it will populate automatically and go where it needs to go. And I just took an example from March 23rd of a Prudential committee meeting that showed kind of all filled out. So beyond the agenda, the minutes, and a link to the recording, there's also additional documents that people can attach to a meeting. So in this case, it was the treasurer's report and the district draft budgets, just so that all the information that is going to be discussed in that meeting is all in one place. And to illustrate this, again, on the left-hand side, on that kind of big rectangle, that is a static page that you can go in, open anytime, type something, press publish, and then that's it. But the problem is that's all, that it doesn't go anywhere. Whereas using meetings, documents, and even team members and news and information and utilizing tags, you're able to cut up the content, in this case, meetings, into little bits and pieces, individual events, and then show it on the home page, show it on the department's page, filter based on tags and whatnot. So that's what I would say is granted, it affects Adam for fire, Jen for water, and Ryan for Prudential. But in terms of the regular use of the website, it's the most substantial difference from the previous one. So I did want to spend a little bit of time kind of highlighting that change. Another piece of this was documents. There was an existing document plugin that I don't believe it had really been used or updated since at least 2024, from what I could tell. So this is somewhat of a burgeoning page and group of category of posts, but for anything related to Ryan went through and after I'd upload the website, he said, "Oh, we need to post the annual reports on the website." So he went from 2026 to 1937 and posted all of them, which are all under the annual reports category, for any finance related documents, whether it's draft reports or published or finalized reports. There is a finance category, and similarly, water departments. That's largely either resources, educational resources, or quality reports, or that type of thing. So in the future, I anticipate making this a little bit more searchable, but for now it's a just kind of a place where documents can go that are categorized by essentially department. And the similar type of content, news and information, this was not utilized by the Prudential Committee. Like honestly, maybe 2 posts in the past couple of years for the fire departments related to hiring or a local event, and similarly with the water department. So wanted to make sure that was more front and center for everyone. So a big change in our behavior as commissioners is, rather than having a high bar for what makes it to the update or how we update people and when we publish it. If there is an update, whether it's news, whether it's something big, something small, this is a communication tool that we can utilize. So updates with the school, updates with the meetings or the annual district meeting, anything like that are now more visible and more accessible. And there's also no limit in terms of how many things we can post. So we can post nothing or be fairly liberal with it. But
can I jump in for a second there?
Please.
Not relating to the guts of the site, so to speak, but the Civic Association generally asks for an update, monthly update, which I send to them on behalf of the Prudential Committee, and I assume water and fire list too.
Yeah.
Should we be adding that to the,
That's a perfect use case.
Yeah.
The work is already being done. It's going through the communication channels are kind of through 2 or 3 different people at that point,
Right.
but correct. If it's an update from the Prudential Committee once a month or fire department, and it's fine to be public, as you know, sharing it with the Civic Association, we could just publish it on here and they would just pull it automatically.
well, I have to say, I haven't been running these by you guys, but I've been doing updates for the Civic Association, assuming that you would be fine with that. Yeah, I can just copy Ryan, and you can post them here as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so again, it's as much or as little as we want to use it. I'm dwelling on this new way of thinking about content only because it's now another tool in our tool belt, so to speak, that we didn't have before.
And then different topic for while I'm interrupting you, sorry.
Please.
The people who are allowed to edit this are Ryan, Jen,
And Adam's Ace.
and Adam, okay?
Yes. Jen, she's been doing it for a long time. Adam has been doing it for a long time as well. So, and Ryan took over and is doing a great job. So, I mean, and myself, I would say, but currently that is the extent of the admin.
Which probably is a good thing. It should be limited to a pretty narrow group of folks.
It doesn't have to be. And there are different roles and privileges associated with, you know, for example, you could be an author versus an editor versus an admin. Admin can make a lot of changes. Authors really just like, you're able to like write something and not even publish it. Editor can like review and publish, but not do certain things. So there are ways we can play with the roles. It didn't strike me as a pressing matter because we can keep it simple. If something should come up that way and someone needs access, we can set a role, set the permissions and go from there.
It works for me.
Consolidated a fair bit of the history that was scattered and on various pages into a history of the fire district page, and did my best to do it justice. At the bottom of the page, there's more information on the history of the water department and I believe the fire department or the Prudential Committee specifically. But you know, it's one of those things like I think it is useful to understand, one, why the fire district exists, and two, just kind of get a sense of Katuitt. And I think this was provided by I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his last name, Gordon, and then also provided by Commissioner Parks on the website. I think it's valuable information. It just doesn't need to be front center on the department pages. Last little bits of kind of miscellaneous things. The water department and the Prudential Committee specifically did put bids and RFPs kind of, again, willy-nilly on various pages. That is now essentially a news post, a blog post, if you will, and with a certain tag, with a certain section on the website. So bids and RFPs can now be found. Similarly, there's a jobs page, which I didn't post there. As far as I know, there are no open jobs, but something that we can utilize moving forward. And then big piece of what kind of started this whole thing was the Freedom Hall events calendar was tied to a plugin, which failed because PHP hadn't been updated. And working with Ryan, what we were able to do is now he created a separate Freedom Hall calendar within Outlook. So tied to his fire district email address where he puts the events in, and those events show up on the website. Keeping it within our Office 365 subscription. And at that point, you know, anyone with a fire district website can presumably access it, you know, make changes, all that stuff. So streamlining a little bit. And second to last piece. So just looking at the footer from the past one and thinking the continual theme is navigation. just putting as much as I could in the footer and in the, combination of the footer and the header. So should there be anything else that people need, I'm happy to add and adapt, but I'm hoping that this checks most of the boxes for people. Oh, sorry, this is a little bit unnecessary, but this is just kind of showing the back end of it. So, a custom place to schedule a meeting, like I mentioned before, a way to easily upload a document, and specific to the water department, ability to publish a flushing notice without really having to go into the different links and pages. This is just the main page when you load WordPress. So what's next? I said squashing bugs, but it's finding any sort of things that are not working correctly. There was one that came up just last week about someone trying to make payment for a fire inspection, the $25 fire inspection fee, and the link wasn't correct. And it wasn't correct on the old website, but then Ryan and I were able to figure out and got that sorted. So as things come up, I will make sure that they are addressed. Standardizing PDF templates for the minutes and the agendas for each of the departments that will check the box for the ADA requirements that for the PDFs need to be computer readable, I guess is what I would say, versus an image of sorry, I'm not explaining this well. In order to meet the ADA requirements, the PDFs that we upload need to be saved a certain way within Microsoft Word. And so creating a template and the instructions for how to save it. And at that point, whenever, someone does it, it'll be done correctly moving forward. This is for the technical people out there, but if future development is something that we want to do, linking it to a GitHub repository and adding version control, so that people can make updates to the website and develop the website without deleting it and doing something extremely catastrophic, and kind of testing it along the way. Long-term maintenance, something that we've talked about before, whether we want to hire an agency to take over the management of it, or continue to find volunteers. And then finally, just kind of new pages, posts, features. I mentioned the document search, anything. There's a lot of places we could go. So, ending with the world is our oyster. But I'm hoping that this provides a fairly high level yet specific enough overview about the changes that I made and the way I've thought about the website and how we can utilize this tool moving forward as a district.
Questions from the Prudential Committee? John, thank you again. We're really happy with the way this looks and understand how much work it took. In terms of the maintenance issue, why don't I suggest that you and or Ryan and or Jen and or Adam put your heads together and make a recommendation to us. I don't have a sense as to what maintenance would cost, but I am open to the idea of having that.
Yeah,
professional.
Definitely. I'll just say this now. My opinion is, I believe we do have some talented people within the district. I have had WordPress experience, so that's why I was interested and able to take this on. If we were open to volunteers, as it stands now, any maintenance task would be extremely minor. I would encourage reaching out to an agency, contracting an agency, if there's going to be another large redesign of some sort. But for most of this, I would say it's going to be extremely minor. So if the district is open to it, or if we're open to it, having a group of volunteers like myself able to just kind of keep an eye on it once a year, just basic housekeeping would be acceptable.
Okay.
For maybe the next 5-10 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my only concern, is that the John Hamel gets hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Problem. But if you think that it can be maintained with volunteer help for the time being, just keep in
I will.
mind that if that changes, you will let us know.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, terrific. Thank you again. We can turn now to the treasurer's report.
Yes, sir. Overall, we ended up, revenue-wise and expenditure-wise in a good position. As you can see, we exceeded our budget for revenue, by about 11%. And that was due to one thing, several things. Number one, tax collections, finished the year strong. And I'll point out this year, we changed the practice of recording the refunds that related to the current year and the following year. We got the information, and for the first time, the town provided information as to who was getting these refunds. So we had, which reduced the amount of refunds that were issued, surprisingly enough. So we got it early enough that we recorded it this year. So that 98% figure, which actually is the same as the current year taxes collected, is now a firm number. It won't be reduced by any refunds. The water department collections were over a conservative budget because of I believe a drought. When I was writing this, we couldn't. I know we're in a drought now, but I thought we were in a drought last year too.
Got been for 3 years.
Yeah, thank you. So it was accelerated by the drought, but it raised a question in my mind that I think we ought to think about. The water department does a detailed revenue projection for the coming year. And it has been our practice to take about 85% of that when we compile the tax levy estimate at the budget. And it also is the figure that we use when we report to the state on what our revenue projections are. And I think that's a good practice because you want to be conservative in those projections to the state, so you avoid what's called a revenue deficit. However, I wonder if, and this is really a question that the water department should opine on, as well as the Prudential committee, should we be reflecting in our monthly reports and our budget worksheets 100%, which is what you project and measure what the water department projects, and then measure against that, while leaving the 85% report for the state, rather than this, if you will, conservative number that we reflect here. It might be worthwhile to measure against what we think the water department thinks it's going to achieve for the year. I think it's a subject of discussion both with the Prudential and with the water department. But that's a conservative estimate of revenue for the water department. The fire department somewhat the same, but to a lesser degree, and it exceeded its budget. The ambulance continued strong this year, and collections were also strong. The other category is really driven by interest, and there again, I always have a very conservative estimate of what I see as interest. Again, because I don't want to report to the state an aggressive number, but I wonder if we ought to measure ourselves against what we think the expectation is, rather than what we're reporting to the state. We could put in the full amount and then on a quarterly basis, take a look at the, how we stand vis-a-vis the state numbers. Something to think about. In any event, we ended up well ahead of our budget on the revenue side. And as we look at the expenditures, overall, we're below budget, 97%, finishing up the year, which is a nice number. The departments have managed their budgets well and deserve kudos for that. The fire department is on budget. They had the benefit of grants, both for the workers' comp on the insurance side, and also for when the chief was on FEMA emergency call duty. This lowers the expense, which provides a nice benefit for the district in terms of a bump of free cash. Water department, again, conservative, under budget, controlling their expenditures very well. Freedom Hall was under budget. I had asked at the last meeting to use $1,500 of the reserve fund to cover what I thought might be a salary overrun, but that did not happen. So I moved $1,500 there. Not really needed, but it'll be used as a bonus in free cash. So it's not lost money by any case. In streetlights, the 5.5 that I asked for was indeed needed. The blizzard caused a higher maintenance than we had anticipated. We try to be generous with the maintenance just because there are unlimited unknowns in that area. But we fell short this year, but we were able to cover it with the reserve. The library completed on budget. Debt service, again, we fell short on the interest projection by a few dollars and by the overall pay down of the principal. We have to estimate that at the meeting before we actually get the budget, before we actually get the loan and know the specifics. But we are able, in this case, because of the debt premium, that is the debt or gave us more money than we asked for as a way of mitigating the interest. And so in this case, I used $5,000 of debt premium to mitigate the interest and keep us on budget. The benefits finished on budget. And in the transfer case, I got confused about $35,000, or I fell in love with the number and decided that's what I was going to transfer, even though the budget had asked me to transfer $38,000. So I ended up $3,800 short in the OPED budget transfer, which will be covered by a due to, due from the general fund. In August, we will fund that receivable or due to and put it in the investment. When we report the numbers to our actuary, when we report the numbers to our actuary, we will include that amount so that we'll get the full benefit of what the transfer should have been. We'll just not show it as of June 30th in the investment account, but it will be in and is in the account, the trust account. So overall, when you look at the expenditures and the revenue, we ended up just about in a wash. If you look at in this case, it looks like we have a surplus of $1,758,000. But if you turn the page and look at the articles, there's approximately $1.8 million of non-funded debt expenditures included in articles. That is not in the page 1 of the P&L. So when you take that into account, the cash performance for the year was a negative 25,000, or really a push. Expenditures and revenue were equal. As you can see, the biggest elephant in the room at the present time is still the fire station. It is progressing on budget. It is behind expenditure timing, but that will be increased over the next 2 months, according to the latest input from the project manager. We will be watching that carefully over the next few months, because we will be making a decision of whether to go into a long-term bond for the entire in December before we're completely finished, or based on uncertainty about the finish, uncertainty about interest rates, we could opt for a 6-month ban and then take a long-term loan in June. School demo, that is a non-funded debt project. Is still $1 million, $1.5 million practically, to go on that. I did not do the funds. I have all the non-operating funds reconciled, but I do not have as I think I mentioned either the last time or the time before, I was in the process of reviewing the reconciliations for the whole year, and I got up to the end of May with the whole reviewed and reconciled. But then June was a very busy and complicated month, and I didn't get into it until too late to complete it. So I have not finished that. So as you see up the top of each statement, this is a preliminary report for fiscal 26, and I hope to have all the issues at least largely resolved by the next meeting, and actually be in a position to start filing the state reports at the end of September, which will be the basis of our getting our free cash certified. I'm estimating that free cash is going to be around 900,000. That is, using a technical term, a squishy number right now, but I think we'll be able to firm that up in the next month. That's substantially it, unless there are any questions about anything in the report.
I have a question about what you're talking about early on with the income related to the estimates, the 85% conservative versus more realistic.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with projections in business, but not necessarily in the municipal sense. Like, what are the pros and cons of being quote unquote real or accurate, and versus being, exceeding our expectations on both expenditures and income?
Well, let's distinguish by audience. We really have 2 audiences. The first audience is ourselves and our taxpayers. And the second audience is the state. to the state, I would recommend being very conservative. I mean, I can recall in business, we always had two budget numbers. We had the budget number that we measured ourselves, and then we had the hardcore, which went to the directors and the public. So that we held something in our pocket to to a larger audience. And I think in the same sense, we ought to be, I would recommend we follow the same practice here. We take our best estimate of what we think our revenue is going to be and use that as our measurement during the year. But when we're talking about the state and we're talking about telling our taxpayers what we think the tax levy will be, I think we should take the conservative approach. So we would actually have numbers that we report to the state that would be different than the numbers we view internally. I think that's easy to keep track of. And I think that if we wanted to look at where we stood on the state numbers, we could look at that on a quarterly or biannual basis so that we knew where we stood there. But I think that, you know, if we think we're going to accomplish and I look at myself in terms of interest, if we think we're going to do that, well, then we ought to say that and measure ourselves against that. And I think it gives us a better opportunity to evaluate incidences that happen during the year and events. When it comes to free cash estimates, then we can go back to the state estimate, the more conservative one.
And just to be perfectly clear, we think our revenue is gonna be 100, we tell the state, we think our revenue is gonna be 85.
Yes.
Okay,
But
then when we measure against ourselves,
We measure ourselves, you know, I tell them,
Against
the state, I'm only gonna make $10,000 in interest, even though I got $11 million in the bank.
Yeah.
You know, that's not fair, if you will, to the committee, or really the taxpayers.
Mhm.
You know, if I don't make 3% of that $11 million, well, shame on me.
Yeah,
And that's what
okay.
I'm saying.
Yep. Understood. Any comments on the treasurer's report from the Prudential committee? No. All right, the last item I told is property looking 2.5, which is just a shorthand for one of the topics that was raised at our last meeting in terms of items we might want to look at going forward. And I'm just looking at our last meeting minutes. Financial policies and long-range budgeting guidelines, and
That was me.
I think that's why I'm turning.
Is
to
this
you.
my cue?
This is your cue.
Well, so. I made some remarks, excuse me, if I didn't say anything, I gotta get the frog on my throat, but. So you recall my remarks at the end of our last meeting,
Yes,
and they kind of were geared toward, you know, fiscal responsibility, revenue strategy, comprehensive planning, that sort of thing. So I guess we're gonna just take one at a time here and we'll talk about it. One of the things that I had mentioned was a Proposition 2.5 style guardrail for our municipal budgeting process and taxing. That may not be the correct terminology for it, but something along those lines. You know, I spoke with Mark Pedro, not at great length about this, but at some length. And I've been thinking about it, you know, pretty continuously, and I've been beating around the bush in my own head about it. So, you know, maybe I guess what I'm really trying to say, what I'm trying to establish, or what I think we should establish, is some form of annual increase framework from which we can budget. I know that Ray already, obviously, we do this on our end, but we don't have a specific number when it comes to the water commission and the fire commission, right? Because we are not bound by Proposition 2.5, which is unusual for a municipality, right? We have to we think outside the box and bring things forward, and then that's just what happens. I realize that because of the way that the fire district operates, an override, a Proposition 2.5 override in a town, right? Has to go through, whether it's a council type city scenario, or it's a traditional town meeting scenario. Say in Barnstable, in the town council, the town council being the legislative body approves it, then it goes out to the voters. In a town meeting scenario, the town meeting has to approve it, the selectmen theoretically bring it forward, the town meeting approves it, and then it goes to a ballot motion. And I guess what we do here basically is like that process already, right? We have items that come forward, big capital items, a la the fire station or whatever. And they go individually to the meeting and the warrant, and then they're approved or they're not. So I guess it really isn't the same thing as Proposition 2.5 at all, what I'm envisioning. I think the mechanism that I'm looking, or the mechanism that I'm trying to isolate, or the way of thinking that I'm trying to isolate when I talk about this, is that it's clear to the community when an override, a tax, or a debt exclusion or an operating override comes before them, that represents a significant variance and requires additional scrutiny, right? That's really what I suppose I'm trying to say, that we need to make a policy regarding. It's clear that when you bring forward a fire station, that represents a significant, variation to the budget. That's what the levy is going to be and what the taxation is going to be. But when you bring forward a significant item, like a significant increase in a salary because of a union negotiation, or whatever, any number of different things, enabling legislation change regarding whatever, that I think that the idea that we can put an exclamation point next to the amount of the increase in the levy and have it. Do you see what I'm trying to illustrate? You see, it's kind of vague, I understand. Because I realized that as I thought about this and I talked about it, we're kind of already there. We just don't have this because of the way that this municipal organization is set up. The framework is already kind of there. But it's about making it clear to the voters and clear to the people who are doing the budgeting that there's an expectation of a certain level of increase on an annual basis. Do you know what I mean by that?
I do know what you mean, and I really should have put a Prop 25 asterisk. Because I was aware that you weren't suggesting that we adopt Prop 2.5, but as you put it, some kind of guardrail. We presumably can pick whatever number we want.
And I just think it's important that we discuss. I don't know if it's germane, if it's reasonable, if you agree, disagree, if people in the district will agree, disagree, if our treasurer will disagree, have any thoughts on it, but you know what I mean? I'm just trying to establish a framework for budgeting that can introduce some kind of predictability into the process and allow for that asterisk to be put on, or the exclamation point, for the education and then the educated voting at the time of meeting.
So if I may, what you're looking for is something that would alert the voters. And if this exceeds some norm,
Right,
that the Prudential Committee feel is appropriate
right. Basically,
on a long-term basis for an operating budget.
I would say that sums it up very clearly. Something like that. I don't know, as I said, I don't know how you guys feel about that. I don't know if it seems reasonable or unreasonable. Is it within our power to do so? I mean, since we are the Prudential Committee, and we are saying whether it is prudent to spend monies in a given way, that it seems logical that would be. We could establish a policy that would meet that end.
Lots of way more questions than answers, but I very much appreciate the proposition. I would be curious to know for example, like what are increases, our non-capital expenditure increases
Mhm.
have been over the last 5 or 10 years? Are we growing at a rate of, well, what is that percentage?
Mhm.
Um,
I don't have it at my fingertips. but
Right.
That's very easy to ascertain. And you could measure that against, the equivalent inflation, that is incurred. So that you would look at our, if you will, expenditures versus inflation. Are we exceeding them? Because at the end of the day, you will have to spend inflation dollars. In other words, over time, you will have to adjust your spending to the rate of inflation if you're going to sustain a constant operational status. Your operating expenses will be hit by it. Your bubble gum, you're gonna be paying bubble gum price plus inflation from year to year. Your salaries will be reflected over time as people need to recover and recoup their loss of buying power. You see that in labor negotiations. But my perspective is to look at this over a long time, over a longer period than just year by year. You could say, over time, we've done this, but this year, we're going to exceed that, and why we're going to exceed it.
Right, that's essentially what I think. I think that that's what I'm essentially trying to say. And, but there's, you could also make the case that, municipalities all around Massachusetts are right now in significant trouble because of Proposition 2.5, because it doesn't accurately, or it didn't anticipate such runaway inflation. Over such a short period of time, because we had, I know that there have been a number of ups and downs and recessions and things, but the whole COVID fall and then the fall was really an outlier in terms of that kind of intense, sticky inflation that still is persistent today. And so, I can understand that point of people would think that, well, it's just an aberration, that do we want to limit ourselves? But you see what I mean? This is evolving in my own mind as we go along. But that is basically what I think that we should try to do, just from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint. Because you can look, I wonder what our running rate of increase has been over the last 10 years. Our budget in the last 7 years has almost doubled, right? What I can remember. And we have to put together a study, I think. Maybe we should charge Ray with some sort of study. And memorandum of understanding.
Let's start with the last 10 years. What has our increase been? I've thought a little bit about this, and kind of had the same reaction as both of you. So what is the number, and can you pick a number that, we should not have an increase of more of that without taking into consideration, for example, the rate of inflation? But it might make some sense if we can pick a rate of inflation that we think is consistently and reliably reported, to ask yourself, why are we spending more this year than our chosen rate of inflation? Is there some justification for that? And as Seth said, put an exclamation point on that.
Yeah, I like the idea of guardrails. Guardrails, if you will, give the idea that when you're going to go over that line, and guardrail really isn't the best word for it. Maybe it's those little bumps that they put at the exits on Route 6, that when you get over that, then you know you're going into an area where you shouldn't. And we need something like that where we would communicate to the public and ourselves, understand, as well as the departmental committees, understand that, hey, there's a real good reason why we're going over this year. Or there isn't a good reason. Just trust us, you know.
Right, it's a matter of policy. You know what I mean, like, there should be a policy, because and that's where, but then, like, so, yeah, I agree with you 100%. And then, so I think about, you know, well, we can talk about it at length, obviously, but what's the mechanism, right? So is it a fire district policy? Do we, the Prudential Committee, have our own policies?
Well, as Ray just raised the question, you know, maybe it's not the guardrail, it's just the noise that the car makes when you're maybe heading into trouble.
I like that.
We could, you know, just make a Prudential Committee policy that says we are not going to vote to approve any increase in a budget that is more than our picked number. Ray doesn't like that idea, he's shaking his head, but that's a for example, meaning, do we need to do a bylaw change? Do we need to, maybe we do, maybe we don't, maybe it's nothing more than we set a policy for ourselves of a level above which we're not comfortable recommending. Again, very early stages, but it's certainly worthwhile to see what those numbers have been for the last 10 years, John.
With all of this, though, if I could boil it down a little bit, it's to minimize increases it's to minimize the tax burden for residents, correct?
Control.
That's
Control. Yeah.
Because they may have to be big for one reason or another.
But I think that's missing kind of the flip side of it, which is, yes, there could be expenses that increase with no return of service or goods. But at the same time, if there is an increase in taxes above this threshold, one would presume that it's for a purpose. And I think that purpose is determined whether or not we want to do it at the annual district meeting. And so in that sense, like, one thing I've always loved about the fire district was that we have this level of freedom and flexibility to do what we want. Now, I understand we shouldn't just spend money and get nothing in return for it. But if we prefer, you mentioned Prudential Committee and prudent choices. Are those choices about how to, you know, elicit or provide, like, I guess, see through the will of the district in prudent ways and make you know, good financial decisions? Or is it to decide or help curb or guard against things that we shouldn't be spending our money on? For example, a new fire station or anything like that. I think it's this conversation so far has been missing the return on the tax, in the sense that, like, if everyone, you know, if the majority of people vote on a new expenditure next year, you know, we can say no, absolutely not. But at the same time, I think people would be willing to. On the flip side, if our goal is entirely to minimize the taxes that we pay each year, then that changes, at least in my mind, kind of how we should be thinking about things.
Well, remember too that we're still very early on in this. It could be a recommendation from the Prudential Committee, which is a recommendation from the Prudential Committee, and people can vote however they want to vote. Or you could say, all right, let's go to an annual district meeting with a proposal that says, just, you know, as happened back in 1980 with Proposition 2.5, voters, do you want this kind of lifetime limit? Or you can make it for 10 years or whatever it is. And maybe they say no, because to your point, we like having the freedom to pay whatever we want for whatever services we want.
Yeah.
Or they might say, yeah, that's not a bad idea. You're right that the Prudential Committee's purpose is not solely to limit expenditures. I absolutely agree with that. We're supposed to be prudent about what we're doing here, which sometimes means spending money.
Sure.
And, well, it isn't about minimizing tax at all necessarily. To me, it's about fiscal policy. You know what I mean? We don't have a cohesive fiscal policy that I can see as a body. I don't see a fiscal policy pertaining to, I mean, I see, like, take the water commissioners, I see like a philosophy. But I don't know, I mean, there's a bit of fiscal policy in there too. Do you know what I mean? The fire district itself doesn't have a fiscal policy. The fire department, and the fire commissioners, they raise and expend and then deal with the operational needs of the fire department, and that's about it. But like this machine that is the municipality doesn't really have a policy that, a fiscal policy, a revenue strategy, and a strategic objective for the next 10 years. And so I'm not saying that I want to make it so that, I make it harder for us to tax and spend when there's an item. I'm just saying that it just is, it's a policy issue. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the basis of it. And maybe it's maybe it is a silly idea, because as you say, you go through it every year at the annual district meeting. I just want to try to create, like, part of my whole feeling about the fire district over the last 7 years has been that we're trying to fill in all the cracks, right? We're filling in the cracks. It gets a little bit better, it's a little more professional, a little more organized, a little bit more predictable, a little bit more, proper in terms of our approach to everything that we do. And I feel like we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there. I think that the idea of really nailing down our fiscal policy, our revenue strategy, and our capital objectives over the next 10 years, and how, that's all just part and parcel to it. So yeah, I know obviously we got to spend the money. We have no choice. We have to continue to keep it a functioning municipal body. This is just a way to try and organize our thinking, or organize the thinking of the populace, and say, we have a strategy and we have an idea of how we're trying to do this. So we can make, at the annual district meeting, if Mark gets up and say, well, granted, that may be a bad example, but an example such as that, where, but there would be, this is our policy, and this is not in line with our policy, and for the following reason, we believe that this is not, you know what I mean? That that's a case to make, as opposed to just being whatever. And that's just a bad example, because I realize we didn't vote. But if you say, take the thing with the historical society, well, whatever, you say, in lieu of our fiscal policy and our financial, our revenue strategy and our the picture that we created for the fire district, this does not fit in for the following reasons, and we have established this policy. You know what I mean? So like, that's my approach.
One of the things that people like about Proposition 2.5 is that it requires coordination among all parts of the governmental entity, meaning, fire and water and Prudential all have to get together and say, I know you want X, Y, and Z, but we want A, B, and C. And so instead of just, here's Prudential's budget, here's fire's budget, here's water budget, it's like, you know what, we need to get together and kind of make some decisions about what we're going to prioritize and what we're not.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, that's a topic that's come up in a few different, times over the recent months, which is just like figuring out how to get the different commissioners together for a more holistic view of the district business. And Seth, I actually completely agree with you in terms of the policy. And I think we could do that as, either an exercise within the Prudential Committee or as part of a larger group discussion, which is saying, explaining the background thinking, explaining, hey, like, maybe it's not codified in the bylaws, or maybe it's not a hard number that we commit to today that it still applies 10 years from now. But it's saying at this point, based on the fire district and how it's been going, like, and what's coming up, like, this is how we are going to approach our fiscal policy informally. And then at that point, if that stance is, I'll say published, but at least public, then by the time the district meeting comes and we're voting on warrants, it's not going to be this like, hey, I support this or I don't support this. There'll be background context as to why that's the case, because we've stated it beforehand.
Yeah, I like this idea. So why don't we, this is going to be a long-term project. Why don't we start with Ray in the last 10 years and what those numbers look like? And, is this something that's dire or something that's just. The nice thing about this is we're in a nice, healthy fiscal position right now. So that's the best time to, make a long-term plan.
Happy to do it, we'll do it, and I think it's beneficial to do. I think one thing that we have to be careful of, is, and I think you hit upon it, John, what has been the related increase in service for those increases? I give an example that the fire department's increase last year versus an increase that we had at Katuitt 2 years ago. Katuitt had to add 3 full-time positions.
Katuitt or
I'm West
West Barnesville?
Sorry. Adding 3 to 5 is a substantial increase. But that was an operating increase. It was not a special article. So when you look back at its history, you'll say, gee whiz, if I average that in, that number gets big. But there was a return of service for that expenditure.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy to do that, but I think we have to look at that. I may be able to start that look at, if you will, because there were changes in service return for increases. And I think the true would be the same if we looked at the departments. So we might come up with a number. The historic increase on an average has been 4.6%. But what services has the district provided to the taxpayers for that increase? That's why I really rail at arbitrary numbers, 2.5%. What the hell is 2.5%? What does that mean? Well, that's the long-term Federal Reserve target for inflation. Well, nice try. They haven't hit that in how many years?
What was the basis for Proposition 2.5?
That's what I mean.
I do not know, but it's been law since 1980.
Yeah, I know that. I think the point I'm making is that any number you pick has a life very limited by history.
If it's a number that doesn't change, I would agree with you.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
If it's a number that changes,
If a number that recognizes the environment you're in, the quid pro quo for the cost increase. But I think you're right. We have to start with some hard numbers. We have to try and look each year, and I think I'll turn to the committees and say, hey, what have you done? And what have we done?
yeah, not in a skeptical way, but
Yeah.
our numbers are going up.
Yeah.
Tell us what the improvements are, and there
Yeah,
definitely
we
are some.
share. And I think we have to go back and look, and let's pick 10 years. And let's try to identify what services we've provided. And God forbid the answer comes,
Nothing.
no, yeah, that's gonna be embarrassing, but I think we should do that. So I will start that. I will poll the committees, and please put on your thinking caps and see what you can remember that we've done over your tenure as a initiative.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that there has to be a certain amount of color commentary on the expenditures, what it has returned, but it's always going to be it's always going to be up for interpretation to a certain extent. But and I take that this is just as when I think about these things, I like to think about all of the different scenarios or all of the different ways of looking at it. There is also, and it's my own. I realize this is part of my idea. This is my idea. But we also have to recognize the fact that Proposition 2.5 in itself may be completely and totally flawed. And that we can see a bit of the wreckage it's creating municipally in Massachusetts. And maybe and I'm just saying this for the sake of, full disclosure and argument, whatever, an alternative way of thinking, is that maybe the fire districts are being immune to that has allowed them to operate at a much more responsible level and been able to provide a more continuous and better service to the public because we're not bound by Proposition 2.5. That's just for the sake of argument, right? I mean, that could also be true, all things being equal, is that we are in a superior position and maybe we're doing a better job overall. I'm not saying that to negate what I said before, but I'm fully open to that possibility as well. I think that, yes, of course, you could have some color attached to these things, but it's important also to just, sometimes, life is just arbitrary numbers. So Proposition 2.5 proves that, I think, so we do 4.5%, but yeah, I see what you're saying. But isn't that a scary thought, though? That everybody in the state lost their minds in 1980 and voting on something.
Forever and eternity, it's gonna be 2.5%. It's really expensive. So I am going to not refer to Proposition 2.5 in the future. I'm going to refer to long-range budgeting guidelines.
Fiscal policy.
Fiscal policy.
But, and
Yeah.
which has a benefit when you go to the market to borrow.
Right, but it looks like we're smart and we got our act together and look, we can lend them on. All this will be great.
We do have a philosophical approach to what we do.
And I very much agree with the transparency and the discussion that would come from, this, having this on the agenda and bringing it to the forefront for the next year. So
Yeah.
regardless if it's what the number ends up or what these numbers say, just having the discussion, I think, is extremely valuable.
Or even if we end up thinking it's a good idea.
Well, that's the thing. It just by talking about it, we'll learn more and keep it informal.
And I think, just for my part, that as we get into this kind of stuff, I think we should invite our lawyer to come as well. Meaning, because he doesn't have to participate directly, whatever, meaning, but like, I like to be able to refer to an attorney at the moment. And rather than labor under a delusion for a while and then.
3 months in, he says he can't do it.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So that like I can get a read sooner than later, whether this is a dead end or whether we're going to actually be able to get somewhere based on his that legal analysis. And I'm saying as we get further into some of these discussions, do you know what I mean?
I would just recommend holding off on like the mechanism part of it, because we're still fairly early on in terms of
Right.
like,
But I
is
mean,
this something worthwhile?
I don't know, whatever I come up with, that's, yes, it's not there to happen, but like, okay, so the legal framework of a given thing. And maybe you can answer those questions, but like, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, generally speaking, not necessarily, I mean, this at some point, obviously, but I feel like if we're gonna be talking about issues where we could become entangled with the law, we should have. It doesn't mean he has to, talk all the time, it's just, we can refer this to the attorney Boudreaux, or maybe we can have him come at some point. Anyway, just a thought.
So every month, I'm gonna refer to this 6/22/26 meeting minutes in which we came up with a number of issues. And part of the issue is our deciding which of these we want to focus on, because we also have a possible updated governance study,
Right,
which would be a significant cost and time effort as well. And also the referring to the attorney, kind of verifying that we are up to date with all our election procedures, et cetera, et
right,
cetera.
our bylaws are consistent, are legal, or all that stuff.
Which also would be a big project, but mostly a project for outside counsel. But let's keep coming back to this.
Of course.
So we don't lose track of what our priorities are.
Because I think they're all of a piece. I think it's all of a piece, and as I said before, filling in the cracks and trying to make this a predictable scenario, and also asserting our philosophical prerogative as a municipal organization. You know what I mean? And I would love to see, like, we've got the Proposition 2.5 thing. all of our bylaws and relative, whether they're legal and then they're consistent, I think that's super important in our election. But one of the other things that I think maybe we can do easier and sooner is to get together all of the boards so that we can discuss,
And Mark Boudreau.
and Mark Boudreau and
That one.
whoever and Ray, and to just so that we can start the conversation about. Maybe we wait until after we have some fiscal policy, but I think that we just need to start meeting and talking about where we're headed as a group or a representative. I mean, it's either way, that line of communication be open and normalized and regulated in a predictable pattern. That's something that I don't know, we could either make a subcommittee, or I don't know if that's within the bylaws. See there, Art.
I will
Panel that.
I will take a look at the bylaws. I'm sure that there is some reference in there to ad hoc committees.
I mean, again, I'm not trying to railroad jam this down. I'm just, this is what I've been thinking about. And I think our meetings are way too short, so we have to be here for you. That's a joke. A few more hours.
I'm afraid you're right. If we're really to discuss something of this complexity, there's some long.
I know, but I think,
The nature of the meeting's so different, though. I mean, it wouldn't be procedural at that point, though. Like I guess I'm
I'm not
technically on the.
complaining.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just stating, like, if we're gonna jump into this, it's a big task.
it is. It is, yeah.
I've been doing this for 7 years. You've been doing it for 6 years, 5 years, 6 at least, right? Almost 6. And we've not done anything like it yet, so I think it's high time. That's my opinion.
All right, so we have one step that we're gonna take for next meeting. Any other comments on this long-range budgeting guideline topic?
Well, for me, I'd say, I think if you could start putting the information together from a nuts and bolts perspective, that we can come and have it be on the agenda next time around.
For sure, and maybe beforehand, that is, have a special meeting outside of the Prudential committee schedule. I know this is not a great time for you.
I'll make it then.
All right, any other comments from the Prudential committee on this topic? If not, we'll open the floor up for public comment. Any from Dave? Okay.
We have Fran.
Fran, go ahead, please. I think you're muted, Fran.
I think I can just.
Fran, can you try to unmute from your end?
Okay,
There you are.
okay. Barbara Anderson. That's where you got 2.5%.
Okay.
She was a woman who was a tax hawk. Several years ago, maybe nine or 10, we had a recommendation from the planning committee that we should look at long range planning. And I think that's what you're talking about. I think before you start delving into the numbers, you need to sit down and come up with a long range plan of what's going to need to be done for the next 10 or 20 finance for the next 10 or 20 years. Fire trucks and ambulance, whatever the water department wants, any necessary repairs on Freedom Hall. And I think that is the best way to start out, is to have a long range plan that you're going to put in effect for 10 to 15 years and have something to follow that's specific. And I guess, I was also going to say, you can have a special district meeting to finance the special fund for the water department employees sick time. You don't have to wait till the annual district meeting. And, that might get that problem solved and off your hands faster than waiting till next year. And I also have one other suggestion, which I've made in the past. A lot of the town meetings on the Cape use electronic counters. So when you go into the meeting, you get a counter that you can press yes or no, and that's how they vote. And I said, I think it would be more efficient to do it that way. You don't have to rely on somebody looking across at the crowd and say, well, I think that, that passed or that didn't pass. And you'd have accurate counts for the votes at the annual district meeting. And I don't know if you can rent those machines to do that, but I think that would make the annual district meeting easier for everyone. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the Zoom call who would like to make a public comment?
That looks like everyone.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
It's 7:36 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Goodness. Fun.